It turns out Rachel has been exposed. She hadn't had her booster and she's been exposed to COVID, so she thought it'd be safer to do it on Zoom. This is our first time doing a presenter on Zoom and in person, so if it seems clunky or whatever, be patient with us, okay? If you have questions, we'll do it in. You'll be asking the questions. I'll be repeating them so that Rachel can hear them. Okay.
There's some really awful feedback, Philip. So I don't know if one of your mics has to be muted or something.
I fixed it.
It's like squeaking. I mean, I guess as long as we can hear Rachel, fine.
Okay, so maybe when we get to the questions, we'll have to see if that's still happening. Okay, hopefully everybody can hear me okay. Okay, so welcome, first of all, everybody who's here. Thank you for joining. I'm sorry that I couldn't be there in person. Like Philip said, our whole family has been exposed. So far, our kids are negative, but just seemed like a good idea to err on the side of caution, given that everything's spiking right now. But for those of you who don't know me, my name is Rachel Turner Williams. I'm a holistic nutrition practitioner. I have both an environmental and public health background, and I strongly feel that food and the choices that we make around food are really at the core of both human and planetary health. And I work one-on-one with clients to help them set and meet unique goals around nutrition and wellness. I'm also a nutrition and food educator and a local food and farm advocate. So that's just a little bit about myself. Today, of course, I'm going to be talking to you about nutrition and bone health and preventing osteoporosis. And this is all going to be through the lens of holistic nutrition. I did prepare a short PowerPoint presentation, so I'm going to go through that first, and there should be plenty of time for questions. And there's also some supplementary documents that I put together that I think Donna sent to everybody. But I'm going to go ahead and share my screen now. So hopefully this will work, get my PowerPoint going. Hoping everybody can see that. Okay, you guys can see? Okay, good deal. Okay. So like I said, this will be really focused on ways to support bone health through the lens of holistic nutrition, like food and lifestyle recommendations. And so before getting into how we can support bone health, I thought it would be helpful to just talk about bone for a minute here. I think a lot of people think of bones as these rigid set structures, but it's important to remember that bone is a living, changing, dynamic tissue. It's made up of living cells. It has its own blood vessels. It's composed of proteins and vitamins and minerals. It has the ability to grow and transform and repair itself throughout its entire lifespan. So it's really this living system. And with that, it's important to realize that whatever we do to and put into our bodies has a direct effect on the health of our bones. And therefore, our diet and lifestyle choices are really important determinants of bone health, which is good news because we have a lot of control over our choices for diet and lifestyle. I just wanted to share a few words about osteoporosis. I think that Dr. Rashad gave a really in-depth presentation on osteoporosis last week, I believe. I'm not going to get into a lot of details, but just wanted to touch on a few points, that it is the most common bone disease in humans. The word itself means porous bone. And it's generally the result of an imbalance between our bone cell processes. So we have bone cells that are constantly making and rebuilding bone, and then we have other cells that are constantly breaking it down, and those are typically in balance. But when they fall out of balance is when you get into issues with bone loss and things like osteoporosis. And osteoporosis is characterized by diminished bone strength and a higher risk of bone fractures. It's a particular risk for postmenopausal women, and that risk increases with age. The good news is, in most cases, it is preventable through diet, lifestyle, and proper supplementation, which is really what we're going to be going over today. So in terms of bone health, the general goals are to really try to optimize our bone mass as much as possible in the younger years, just to build up as much as we can, and then to minimize as much loss as we can and fractures as we get older. And then the key factors in doing this are, that I'll be talking about, are through food, physical activity, other lifestyle factors, and supplements. Just in getting into diet first, for dietary recommendations, I imagine probably one of the first things that comes to your mind in preventing osteoporosis is calcium. Everyone hears the need to have calcium, and that's for a really good reason. It's really critical in building and maintaining healthy bones. When our bodies are deficient in calcium, our bodies can leach calcium from the bones, which of course causes fractures and brittle bones. So it's really important to get adequate levels of calcium. But it's important to note that calcium doesn't act on its own. Like taking just a simple calcium supplement on its own has little benefit. Calcium has to work in a team with all these other critical minerals and nutrients. Just want to point that out, so that some people think you can just take a calcium supplement and be done with it. But minerals really work together to promote bone health. But good sources of calcium in food include dark green leafy vegetables and a lot of sea vegetables like kelp. Almonds are a good source. Quality dairy products, oily fish, especially with the bones, like a lot of canned fish includes little bits of bones, which are actually a very good source of calcium through the diet. So it's important to be getting as many of those calcium-rich foods in as we can. Vitamin D is also critical for bone health. There is a direct correlation between our bone density and levels of D in our blood. So it's been found that high levels of D in the blood are associated with lower levels of bone fracture risk, and vice versa. So low levels of D are associated with a higher level of bone fractures. D is also important for the absorption of calcium. It reduces the rate of postmenopausal bone loss. Again, when used with calcium, they work together as a team. It's also really important for improving muscle strength and balance, which is particularly important as we get older, and helps with preventing falls and keeping up our strength and energy. There are not a whole lot of food sources of vitamin D, but some good ones include oily cold water fish like salmon and herring and sardines, fish oils, also whole eggs and mushrooms. We also, of course, produce vitamin D through our skin when we're exposed to sunlight, but still a lot of people are deficient, and there aren't that many food sources. So it is one that many people can benefit from supplementing, but I'll be getting into supplements later. I also wanted to, at this point, just mention, I see some people writing stuff down. There is a handout that that covers a lot of this, especially as I get into the supplements and amounts and stuff. That will all be on your handout, so don't feel like you have to be frantically writing, you know, to keep up. If it helps you, of course, do. But I just want to let you know that that information will be given to you as well. So yeah, foods that are rich in vitamin D are important to include in the diet. Likewise, vitamin K is really vital for bone health. It's important for the production of the bone protein osteocalcin, which is a key part of our bone matrix. And good sources of vitamin K include green leafy vegetables, broccoli, lettuce, cabbage, spinach, also green tea, asparagus, fresh green peas, oats, and whole wheat. Green tea has been found to be especially beneficial in preventing osteoporosis. And they think that's not only is it that it's a high source of vitamin K, but it also is really rich in polyphenols, which seem to be protective against it. So that's a good, if you like green tea, that's a good thing to incorporate into your day. You also want to include foods that are rich in boron, which is a trace mineral that's protective against calcium loss and osteoporosis. It's also required for the activation of vitamin D. And you find boron in a lot of fruits and vegetables, but some that are particularly high include prunes, avocados, raisins, apples, pears, beans, and coffee. And there was an interesting study done that showed women who were at the first few years of menopause, which tends to be a time when bone loss starts to increase because our estrogen levels drop. And so those bone processes I talked about, like the breaking down and the building, the breaking down starts to outpace the building. So what they found that these women who were eating 3 ounces of prunes were able to offset that higher risk. So their bone density levels stayed at the same amount. And they attribute that to both the boron in the prunes as well as the high level of antioxidants. So I just thought that was an interesting kind of easy thing to throw into your diet if you like prunes, and it's a good bone health snack. We also, in looking to the diet, want to limit foods that create calcium loss from the body. So there's certain foods that cause us to excrete calcium. One is a diet really high in sugar. A high intake of sugar tends to be followed by an increased rate of calcium loss through the urine. So you want to try to avoid really high levels of sugar intake. Likewise, a diet high in phosphates causes calcium excretion as well. And it's important to note that the phosphorus actually is essential for bone health, and it helps for calcium to absorb. But when you have too much of it taken in without it being accompanied by calcium, then it can cause this excretion. And so things like sodas are really high in phosphates, but they don't come with that dose of calcium. So they're known for excreting calcium from the body. Likewise, a diet that's too acidic, like really highly acidic, can cause the same effect. So things that cause high acid ratio in the body are really high intake of meat and dairy and refined flour products can be really acidic. And if you're doing a lot of those without more alkaline rich vegetables and fruits, it can kind of boost into this acid ratio that excretes, because the body will take calcium from the bones in order to buffer the extra acid and try to maintain pH levels. Yeah, it's important to not have too much of those acid foods without the alkaline along with them. So those are all things to think about limiting. I also wanted to talk about the role of protein in bone health, which is kind of an interesting one. It seems to be like a Goldilocks scenario where both too much protein and too little protein can put you at increased risk for osteoporosis. Too little can really impair the formation of your bone matrix, but then too much of that, particularly the animal protein, can be acid forming, which is kind of what I just talked about, and cause that excretion. But it's also really important from a muscle mass standpoint because it helps to keep up that muscle mass, which is really important along with bone health as we're aging. So you want to be sure you're getting enough without it being excessive levels of animal protein. And so that kind of begs the question. I know a lot of people ask, well, how much protein do I need? And I wish it was one simple answer, but the nutrition world's kind of all over the board with protein recommendations. So I thought it'd be helpful to at least go over some general rules of thumb out there to give you an idea of what kind of protein your body needs. The recommended daily allowance is 0.8 grams per kilogram of body weight, or in pounds, that would be 0.36 grams of protein per pound of body weight. And that recommendation's been out there for a long time, but I just want to mention that that should really be treated as a very base minimal amount that's sort of based on how much the body needs to avoid being sick, rather than how much it really needs to the optimal amount for it to thrive. Generally, we need a lot more than this, and how much we need, how much more really depends on how active we are, how old we are, where we're at in our life stage, what kind of personal conditions we have going on, if we have any illnesses or injuries, all those sort of increase our protein needs. But that bumps that recommendation generally up to at least 1 gram per kilogram, or generally as high as 1.7, or even sometimes as high as 2, depending on what's going on with each individual body. Some other rules of thumb out there are to get 10 to 35% of your daily calories from a protein source. And again, I would use that 10% as a very minimal base level. That's sort of the same idea. That's the amount you need to avoid being sick. You probably need more to thrive. In the functional medicine world, there's this rule of thumb I've heard for the average adult needs somewhere between 60 to 90 grams of protein in a day, or that could be broken up into 20 to 30 grams per meal if you're looking at 3 meals throughout the day. Where you land within that range, of course, is going to be dependent on what's going on for your body individually, where you're at with things. So you kind of need to experiment with what feels right for your body and what's going on for you. And then just wanted to note again that the diet ratio is important to factor into your protein. So again, trying to make sure you're getting enough of those alkaline rich vegetables to go along with whatever proteins you're eating to keep that ratio healthy. Okay. I also wanted to mention that there is an association between the intake of soy products and higher bone density. And they think that this is because a lot of soy products are naturally high in calcium. That's one reason. But they also have these compounds called isoflavones, which act as phytoestrogens. And kind of as I mentioned earlier, like when people start to go into menopause, those first few years, the estrogen levels drop, and that can put the balance of those bone cell processes out of balance, where you're getting more bone loss. But they're thinking that the phytoestrogens have a way of combating that so that they even out more. So if you like soy, that can be a good thing to be sure you have in your diet. And good sources include whole soybeans or edamame, tofu, natto, soy sauce, miso, and tempeh. If you are doing soy, I would recommend doing organic or at least non-GMO certified if you can, just because a lot of the conventional soy has a lot of pesticides, including glyphosates and things that really don't do our bodies any favor. So if you can, if you are adding that in, I would recommend being sure that they're organic or at least non-GMO. And I just wanted to kind of recap the dietary recommendations before moving on into lifestyle, just to kind of highlight the takeaways to remember for the dietary recommendations. And those are really, you're wanting to eat foods that are rich in calcium, vitamin K, and boron. And green leafy vegetables are a great source for all of those. So, I mean, it's a good rule of thumb if you can remember to just be sure you're getting those greens in you every day. It's going to do your body a lot of favors beyond bone health, but that you're going to, you're going to be getting a lot of those vitamins in you. Also eating foods that are rich in vitamin D. And again, that's your cold water, oily fish, whole eggs, and mushrooms. Limiting foods that excrete calcium. And again, that's the high levels of sugar, the high phosphate foods like sodas, and then the excessive animal protein or other highly acidic foods. And you can consider incorporating both green tea and soy, which are protective. And again, focusing on those alkaline-rich vegetables and fruits to help with that overall ratio in your body, which is also going to up those minerals that are good for bone health. And then getting adequate protein without it being excessive amounts of animal protein. So that kind of sums up the dietary part of this. And again, you're going to get a little cheat sheet to go with this. Let's see. So then moving on to lifestyle recommendations, I cannot stress enough the importance of exercise on bone health. It has a huge positive effect on bone density. It's been found that just 1 hour of moderate activity 3 times a week not only prevents bone loss, but can actually even increase bone mass in postmenopausal women, which is huge because you can rebuild any bone loss that you may have had. It's probably one of the most important recommendations I could think of if you could do the exercise, incorporating that into your day. And both weight bearing and strength training are really beneficial. Ideally, you'd want to aim for about 4 weight bearing exercise sessions in a week and 2 strength training sessions. And it sounds like Elizabeth, I think, is giving a talk next that's going to be specific to exercise and bone health. I'm sure she'll have some really specific recommendations, which is great. So some other lifestyle recommendations are to avoid smoking and secondhand smoke. Smoking tends to cause more rapid bone loss and lower bone mass. And it's also been shown that postmenopausal women or smokers have higher rates of bone fractures. So something to avoid. You also want to limit alcohol intake. Alcohol seems to affect bone in a dose-dependent way. So it's actually been found that low to moderate levels can possibly be beneficial, but high levels are not beneficial and actually also put you at risk for falls and fractures. So a general recommendation is fewer than 7 drinks in a week and no more than 2 in one day. I also wanted to mention here, I'm not quite sure if it fits into lifestyle, but it seemed like the best place to put it. There is an association between long-term use of the proton pump inhibiting acid blocking drugs, like for stomach acid, and the risk of hip fractures. And they think that's because stomach acid is needed in the absorption of calcium. And so those the medication is blocking the acid. So I just thought that's worth mentioning if those are something that you rely heavily on, that maybe you'd want to consider other ways to address stomach acid issues. And then the last lifestyle recommendation is trying to carve out some time to be outdoors every day, even if that's just 10 to 15 minutes. That's going to really help with your vitamin D production, which we saw is really important for bone health. And then for added bone health protection, you may want to consider adding in some supplements. And these are some of the key nutrients that you could consider adding in. And again, this is all on your cheat sheet, these amounts, if you, so don't feel like you need to rush to write them down. You'll have all of that. But the first is up to 1,000 milligrams per day of calcium. More of the, like a larger dose than that could actually impair the absorption of magnesium and other minerals. So it's not recommended to go higher than that. I also wanted to point out that calcium citrate and tricalcium phosphate are absorbed well in the body, whereas calcium carbonate, which is used in a lot of calcium supplements, I think because it's cheaper, that's not as well absorbed in the body. So that's something you may want to think about if you are looking for a calcium supplement to try to rely on the other two forms that are more well absorbed. Magnesium is just as important for bone mineralization as calcium, and the recommended amount there is 350 to 500 milligrams per day. There's also an association between a deficiency in magnesium and osteoporosis, so that's why that's really important to be getting. We talked a lot about vitamin D and how important it is for bone health. When it's taken along with calcium, it reduces the rate of bone loss. It also improves muscle strength and balance, and is associated with greater bone density. So a general recommendation for general health for vitamin D is usually around 2,000 IU. But if you have impaired bone or bone loss already, you probably want to consider going higher, perhaps up to 5,000. But it's always best to check your blood levels of vitamin D first, and if you're going to supplement, and kind of see where you're at and how much you want to add. And that's a simple blood test that can be done. We talked about how critical vitamin K is for overall bone health and the bone matrix. And so the recommendation there is 100 micrograms per day. There's also been a link between deficiency in B vitamins and vitamin C and osteoporosis. And so that's why these next few are listed on here. The amount for B6 recommended is 25 to 50 milligrams, and the folic acid and B12 are both 800 micrograms per day. For vitamin C, it's 250 to 500. And C is really important for the formation of structural proteins of bone. And also, like I said, it's linked to deficiency in C, and these B vitamins is linked to osteoporosis. And a high quality multivitamin and mineral supplement is going to cover a lot of these, especially the smaller amounts that I'm saying for these. And then you may need a supplement on top of that, depending on what you're adding in, if you are doing more calcium or vitamin D or magnesium. But a lot of the small amounts are going to be covered in just a good quality multi. So other supplements to consider, a good high quality fish oil or omega-3 fatty acid. And we saw that those fatty fish were recommended for multiple reasons. Also the minerals zinc, manganese, and copper, which are all likewise associated with a deficiency in these is associated with the likelihood of osteoporosis. Zinc is also really important for the formation and function of the bone cells, and it enhances vitamin D, and it's needed in the synthesis of different bone proteins. So those are all important to get in, and those are generally covered in a good multi, all those smaller amounts. Another consideration would be a flavonoid-rich extract or greens formula, which would be really alkalizing and give you a lot of antioxidant support. And that might be especially important if you know that you're not getting a lot of the greens that you should be getting each day, that's a good one to add in if you just know you're not getting those greens all the time. So biocell is another consideration, and that's a really bioavailable form of silica, which is important in our bone calcification. And the recommendation there is 6 to 10 milligrams per day. And I already talked about how helpful green tea is, and a dose is 250 milligrams of the polyphenols, which are like really the active compounds in the green tea. And you can get that through 3 to 5 cups a day if you're drinking the green tea, or you could get it in supplement form at that dose. And you could do both the supplement or the tea in a decaffeinated version if that's your preference. So that kind of sums up all the food, lifestyle, supplement recommendations that I had through a holistic nutrition standpoint. And then hopefully you have these first two resources already that I think they were sent to you today. One is that handout that summarizes everything that I just went over, just kind of a quick reference to go through. And then I also have like a bone health meal plan, one that's vegetarian or plant-based, and one that has meat. I think you probably got both of them. And those include like a shopping list and recipes, but all the recipes sort of focus on all those bone nutrients within the meals. And you're welcome to have access to my supplement dispensaries if you're wanting to set up an account for high quality professional supplements. You can let me know and I can set you up with an account where you'd have access to thousands of different products and hundreds of different brands. They're all guaranteed to be non-tampered and high quality direct from each of the companies. So if you're interested in that, feel free to reach out to me and I can set you up and you'll have access to all those at a discounted rate. So that's kind of it for the presentation. So I'm gonna stop this so that I can see everybody again. Okay, and at this point, I would love to open it up to any questions.
I have a couple questions.
Oh, okay, is that Stephanie?
Yeah, hi.
Hi.
Thank you.
Uh-huh.
So one question about whole eggs. You mean like not separated?
Yeah, because a lot of people try to avoid the yolk for other reasons. So you want to make sure you get the yolk.
All right.
The whole thing. They both, the yolk and the whites have their own benefits, but you definitely want to make sure you get the yolk for the vitamin D.
All right.
Yeah.
One, thank you. Two is if you're trying to avoid over acidic intake, where do tomatoes and citrus fruits fall into that?
So most citrus fruits, even though they are acidic, they're not acid forming. It's kind of confusing. Like they become, they're more like a base inside the body. So I could actually there's a list that I use from the Encyclopedia of Natural Medicine that I find really useful to look up. It has a lot of the typical foods and where they rank. I would be happy to send that to you if that's helpful.
Yeah.
But yeah, mostly citrus does tend to be to not be acidic, not acid forming.
Okay, so it's about acid forming, not acid intake.
Yeah, exactly.
And then my other question was if you had any, I know there's a gazillion multivitamin brands. Are there any that you recommend?
There are some that I recommend that I've used with clients, and I know like doctors that use them, and I really trust their opinion on them. I could send you the exact, but some like Metagenics is a good brand, Pure Encapsulations. Those are the two that I often use with people.
What was the second one?
Pure Encapsulations. Also Thorn is a good clean brand, but they all have different different formulas even within the brands. So kind of depending on what, if you just like want a general one, there's some that are you take 2 a day, some you take once a day. It kind of depends on what's going on with you and what your preferences are. Like they don't just have one multi with, you know, for each company. They have different formulas. But if you want to ask, you're welcome to reach out. Like I could send you some just for general. Is that?
Yeah, just as a general one to go along with any other supplements to kind of cover a lot of the.
Yeah, I could send you a link to the exact formula. That there's like 3 that I'll often end up recommending. I just don't, there are those brands, but I can't tell you the exact.
Right, your
formula.
basic good postmenopausal multi.
Okay, yeah, I'm gonna jot that down to make sure I.
Thank you.
Uh-huh.
I look at them all in the store and my eyes cross and I
I
go
know,
with
there's
the chocolate
so,
aisle.
I know there's so many options out there. Okay, I'll send you the link.
Cool, thank you.
The ones that
Okay.
I tend to recommend.
I have a question.
Uh-huh.
What do you think about Bone Up by Jarrow?
I am not familiar with it. I'm familiar with Jarrow. There's some probiotic formulas I've used from them that I like. I have not familiar with Bone Up though.
Well, it's got calcium and boron, and it's let's see,
Sounds
vitamin K. It's the let's see, my mind is not going right to it right away. It's a well, it's got vitamin K and boron and manganese and all sorts of other stuff like that, aside from the calcium. And the calcium is in a different form. It doesn't say. I wish I could go find my jar. Maybe I'll go look for my jar and come
oh,
back.
okay. Yeah. And actually you're also welcome if you want to, you could email me a photo of it too. And I could look it up and see if it's on kind of what I know about it from my dispensaries too.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
Well, happy to do that.
Thank you.
I think, was Barbara just trying to,
I just muted myself. I'm going to go see if I can find the container.
okay, thanks. Any other questions? Oh, Barbara Goodell, I see you raising your hand, but I can't hear you.
Looks like somebody at the senior center has a question too.
Can you hear me?
Oh, yes.
Hi, Rachel. It's Elizabeth Summers.
Hi, Elizabeth.
Hi. So I have 2 questions. You might have mentioned coffee. I know it's a source of antioxidants and good for your brain, but I want to know what it does to your bones. And also you said no sodas. I don't drink soda, but I drink sparkling water that I make myself at home. Are those okay?
So I was curious about the sparkling water too. From what I've read about it, it's not high phosphates. So it doesn't have the same effect as the sodas. Coffee, according to the Encyclopedia of Natural Medicine, which is the source I use, I've seen different charts on the acid base of foods. Coffee actually comes out, it was either neutral or base on theirs, which I was surprised by, happily surprised, but yeah, but I can send that list. That's the one that I use. Does that answer the question?
Thank you. Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, I remembered the part of the formula for the calcium is something rather hydroxyapatite. Hydroxyapatite. I can't find the bottle because I think I just put it over into smaller bottles.
Let me, you remember that, so the formula is called Bone Up?
It's Bone Up, yeah, by Jarrow Formulas.
Okay, why don't I can look into, I'll look up the actual formula so I can see everything that's in there and I could let you know.
Okay.
If I have a way of reaching you, I guess, or maybe send me an email so I have your email address, and then you
Okay,
have
I'll
my
have to-
email address on the handout.
Well, I haven't
You wanna
downloaded the
put your email
handouts yet.
in the chat.
I haven't downloaded the handouts yet.
Oh, okay. I can put mine in the chat here.
Oh, okay.
And I'll send you the handouts again too, Barbara. You
Oh,
want?
good.
Okay.
Oh, good, because I can't find this chat on this screen here either.
Oh, okay. Okay.
But is there hope for those of us who already have it? I have it really bad. Is there hope?
Well, yeah, I mean, that's what I really liked about the exercise recommendation, is that it showed that even just that moderate amount of exercise was able to help rebuild bone density. So I think exercise is critical for anybody who already has, or for anybody, period, but particularly if you already have osteoporosis. So I would definitely follow that and feed your bones. I mean, your bones, like I said, they're it's a living system. So they are still building and forming, and you can be nourishing them through what you're eating and what you're doing.
Well, I know this was covered in Dr. Rocha's talk last week, but I didn't know about that one. Sorry, that was a big one for me to have missed. But I'm really considering taking the Prolia injection because my osteoporosis is putting me, into too much pain to be able to function. So I don't know what you think about Prolia, or if you want to say anything about that.
I don't know very much about, really, like I said, my training is really through holistic nutrition. So I don't know a whole lot about the medications, to tell you the truth. So I think that would definitely be something to talk with your doctor about.
Okay.
But
Or maybe
you can do a lot to support yourself through nutrition and lifestyle. But yeah, again, it depends on where you're at, and I think your doctor would probably best know in terms of medication.
Yeah. Okay.
It also looks like Schaefer Sus has their hand up. I don't know if they have a question.
Yes, I do. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay. Hi, this is Nita. I've recently had a discussion with my doctor because I have osteopenia, which is a prior condition to osteoporosis, and he does not approve of calcium supplements. He says they're associated with heart disease. So I've run into some discussion with him about that, and he said that I should just aim toward dietary calcium. But when I look at how much I'd have to eat compared to what I normally eat, it's just a lot more calories and a lot more foods that I all eat. So I'm just wondering how you modify your diet to keep in line with just healthy eating.
Do you do a lot of
1,200 milligrams of calcium is a lot of calcium.
Yeah, it can be done through diet if you're really good about especially getting those greens in you, and some quality dairy products, the fish. Again, do you like fish?
I eat everything, yeah.
Oh, good. Okay.
But I don't drink soy. But I can eat soy products. I grow a lot of green vegetables. I eat, any kind of dairy products. So I really focused on all those, but it's still a lot more
Have you been
food and calories than I'm used to eating.
Okay, and you are tracking how much you're getting then?
Yeah.
Yeah. I imagine the concern that they have is kind of what I was saying about, minerals are all, they act together and they interact with each other and they affect one another. So it can mess up the balance if you have too much, like if you're really strong in one versus another. And that's probably the concern about just doing a calcium supplement. You can get it through your diet for sure. If you really are good about eating a lot of those greens, and it is possible. But yeah, I mean, I don't want to override anything that your doctor is telling you. I don't know any of the unique circumstances either, that why they might be concerned. So, if they feel that you should not be on a calcium supplement, I would not use
So
one.
you don't know anything about calcium supplements being associated with heart disease?
My only thought on that is the balance of minerals, because it does affect your heart, but it just depends on what the full picture is. And you do have to be cautious of like any single mineral, which is why a lot of times they come together, or multi, so that you're not getting one large dose of just one mineral, because it can leach, it can affect, like, leach your other minerals too. So it's the minerals, they work in tandem, but they also work against each other. And I imagine that is probably the concern that your doctor has, maybe.
Okay, thank you.
Mhm.
I guess Ronnie at the senior center has a question. She's
Okay.
been standing there for a while. We have to unmute the senior center.
There.
Okay, now can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay. You mentioned high sugar, and I wonder what high sugar is considered, how much, given that it also shows up in pretty much every kind of food or sauce you buy, if you're trying to avoid it.
Yeah. So that recommendation is really like high levels of sugar. They're gonna like pastries, cookies, like a massive amount at once is going to cause that. It's kind of all about balance. I mean, if you look, sugar in general, I think people tend to say if you can limit it to like 5 grams a day, that's not really easy if you have a sweet tooth, and if you eat a lot of processed foods do have added sugars. But yeah, that recommendation, it's based on what like a high infusion of a sugary food does with the calcium excretion from the body. So if you say you have, a bunch of cake without other stuff to balance it out, and again, that kind of speaks to the balance of what else is in your body. But high intake of sugar does cause more excretion of calcium through the urine. And if that answers the question or not, like, yeah, in terms of like how much sugar you need, that's, nobody really needs a lot of sugar. So it's more like, yeah, limiting it as much as you can. For refined sugar, not for natural sugars. Barbara's hand up.
I think I figured out how to unmute myself. Can you hear me now?
Yes.
Yeah, okay. I had a question about the slide where you were talking about potassium, and there was a picture with corn on the cob in it. It was the corn meant to show that it was good to eat or not so good to eat?
The corn
On the cob?
I don't remember what slide that was.
It was the one regarding potassium, I think.
Well, corn,
or just in general, how does corn figure into calcium? Yep.
in whole corn, again, I guess what pops into my head with corn is, would be the same concern as soy, like wanting to be sure it's
Mhm.
organic and non-GMO, because you're going to avoid
Right.
pesticides. And then the more processed corn is, the more its ability to spike blood sugar and that kind of effect. But if you're talking whole corn, that I don't think that's a concern.
Okay. Thank you.
Uh-huh. Stephanie? Oh, are you?
There, okay.
Okay.
After I had osteoporosis diagnosed, a doctor suggested to me that I take calcium carbonate specifically
Okay.
with my vitamin D.
Yeah.
And I kind of remember her reasons. It was sort of a dual function. So to help with stomach, just one thing to do two functions rather than two separate things to do two separate
Okay.
functions. But I wanted to hear a little more about how it might not be doing its job, taking
what
that form of it.
Yeah, what I've read about it is it's not as well absorbed. That doesn't mean it won't work. You definitely want to be having it with food. I mean, any calcium is better absorbed with food, but particularly the calcium carbonate. So you can it'll still do its job, but the recommendation, the other two versions are more easily absorbed by the body. So.
Okay, so
But
maybe
if your doctor is, I don't want to override anything your doctor
Yeah.
is
I'll
recommending.
try one of the others after I finish this jar, this bottle. One other question was about the magnesium. So I think I've been taking like 300 milligrams once a week as part of
Oh.
my routine. Is that something that's included in a multi? And, sounds like that was something that should be up from what I'm currently doing.
So a lot of multis do include some magnesium. It may not be that much, but again, with the supplements, it's hard to give exact recommendations, without knowing your diet and everything too. Like I would always definitely recommend focusing on diet first and moving out from there. But yeah, it depends on if you're getting magnesium rich foods in or not. But a multi usually does cover some of it. But probably not to that extent, probably not to 350.
Thanks.
Mm-hmm.
I have a question.
Uh-huh.
I know you're not supposed to take calcium and iron at the same time, right?
Uh-huh. Yep.
Are there any other things you shouldn't take calcium with, where you should take them separately, time separate?
Yeah, those you probably want to wait at least 2 hours like after a multi. For calcium and iron are the two that kind of come up a lot. And no, those are the two main ones.
Oh, okay, nothing else. So you could just take your calcium.
I mean, I tend to recommend for people, if they're taking magnesium, to take it in the afternoon or evening. I don't know when you'd be taking your other vitamins, but that's more from a relaxation standpoint, because it helps the body to relax. So that one I might recommend just taking later in the day.
Okay, thanks.
Uh-huh. Any other questions? Let's see if I can see everybody on here.
No more questions from the senior center. Thanks very much again for
Oh, you're
presenting, and thanks for being flexible and jumping right on Zoom when we couldn't meet in person.
Yeah, no problem.
We
Yeah,
appreciate
thank
that.
you, Rachel. You're awesome. Thank you so
No
much.
problem. Thank you.
Thank you.
guys
Thank
for being
you.
here.
Thank you so
Yeah,
much.
feel